Welcome back to the 243rd episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, including men and women living in completely different worlds, an article from Slate, some more details about Boeing's less than stellar processes are coming out, and an article talking about DeSantis and what he's doing here in Florida that is making conservatives so happy. And of course, we will end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. Now, that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump in to our daily debate. So, when in a society, there is such a stark divide between any two groups, is it always going to end badly? And what I mean by that is not like, one race versus the other, because in the United States, we've had demographic trends that indicate certain races are going to vote more one direction than the other. I mean, some of them are changing, some of them are being flipped on their heads, some of them have been like this for quite some time. But when it comes down to something so integral like men and women, or the great example I can think of off the top of my head is parents versus non-parents. Those are two things or two groups that are going to be present in practically every single society. They're not going to make up 50-50. Neither does the dividing by sex, because I believe women are about 55% of the population in the United States and 45% for men. Then again, that could be more of a breakdown of college statistics just based off of my memory. But the point being, is this sort of divide going to be a drastic one? Or more men voting for Republicans and more women going on the side of Democrats? Is it going to make harder to have these sort of integral families, when a lot of times nowadays people are not necessarily scared of other people's politics, but they take it into consideration when going into the dating pool? And with these stark divides, is that going to make it harder to start families, to reproduce, to even just have happy, fulfilled lives as a family member, as a man who wants to support their spouse, a woman who wants to support their spouse, having a career, but then also having something outside of that, or at least a committed relationship, not even necessarily a marriage, but a committed relationship where you always have that person to lean on. Sometimes you can find that in other sexes as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be the male boyfriend or husband or woman girlfriend or wife. You can have best friends. You can have nowadays you can have committed relationships of opposite sex. So maybe it doesn't actually have to mean that much, but it does always feel like the integral part of a society, the base unit that we need to care about, isn't just the individual. Of course, we need to focus on them, but the first representation of a broader society and sustaining something for the next generation really falls within like the family unit. So is there going to be repercussions that are very dangerous, in your opinion, from, or not necessarily dangerous, but repercussions that may not be favorable? Maybe there are repercussions and you think they're favorable. Maybe throw those down there in the comment section too. I would love to hear all of the opinions about this one. So, like I said, this article comes from Slate, and the headline reads, "The political divide between men and women is getting wide. One party is primed to take advantage." So, I think we've discussed this trend a little bit before, especially when looking at Donald Trump and the breakdown of people that are voting for him. A lot of them are male, especially from the groups that you wouldn't expect a Republican to get a large assortment of votes. I mean, if they're college age or college graduates, they're more likely to vote liberal or Democrat. But guess what? If there is a group within the college educated segment, it's going to be males that are going to probably go for Donald Trump. So there are a few little things that hint here that, okay, hey, some guys are looking at Trump and they're saying, I like something about him. Or they're saying, I don't necessarily like him at all. I think his attitude is terrible. I think his mentality is terrible. But I like something about his policies. I like the Republican Party overall. There are lots of different reasons as to why many men would go that direction. The article does propose some. We'll get to those a little bit later. I would propose others, but at the end of the day, that's not necessarily what they're trying to get at. They're talking more about the divide and how it's going to affect politics and also the society moving forward. Quote, it has long been the case that American women are generally more liberal than American men. But among young Americans, the gender gap has widened in an enormous rift. According to a recent Gallup poll, there is a 30-point difference between the number of women aged 18 to 30 who self-identify as liberal and the number of men in that demographic who do the same. So, we're seeing here 30-point change. Whew, that's not small. Let's be clear, it's not huge. We're not at the point where it's like 50, or we're not at the point where it's like 75, but still, that's trending upward, something that needs to be taken into consideration. Quote, that's largely because young women have gotten much more liberal, while young men have stayed ideologically more consistent, or according to other analyses, become more conservative and anti-feminist. Of course, not every person identifies as a man or a woman, but gender roles still play a big part in shaping our lives and politics, and to this extent and context, we will limit it in the column. I am focusing mostly on blah, 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 blah. The nice little, hey, don't get mad if I don't say non-binary and any other sex here, because the study obviously only focuses on men and women, or at least the poll does. So can the author really extrapolate on anything else? No. Quote, it's not happening just here either. The political divide between the sexes is a trend that researchers have observed in some other countries too, which I thought was a very interesting point. Is this only happening in places where the college education level, the amount of people within the population that are college educated, going up? Is this happening in places that are more developed nations? Is it happening in less developed nations? Is it happening in the West, not in the West? I think all of these factors would be very interesting, and I would love an even more stringent breakdown of this in the future. And if it comes out, I will talk about it. I was going to say report on it, but at this point, I'm actually commenting on an article. If it does come out and the raw data just comes out, maybe I'll quote-unquote report on it and do that rather than reading somebody else's opinion and adding commentary to it, which is, let's just say, it's a lot easier than going and doing looking through the tax forms yourself, which I've done once or twice. Not necessarily, I'm not going to say it's hard. I'm not going to say it's easy, because you do have to do a little bit of digging, and for even more comprehensive analysis, that is definitely more difficult than just going through a nonprofit's breakdown and things like that. But knowing what you have to look for is important, and I'm sure that when these people do the research firsthand, especially with these polls, they're putting in the time. And if a poll of that nature comes out, I will put in the time for that 100% more than just doing a little bit of commentary here and there. So what I found, the other interesting part was some of the guys, the article here is saying that most of the guys are just staying the same and women are becoming more liberal. Is that because more women are going to college nowadays, so they're becoming more educated? They're starting to see these different inequalities in the workplace more, maybe because they're out there in the workplace more, at least from their perspective? Or are they outright saying that the women are just being taught to be this way? I honestly don't know. I don't think we can look and say 100%, oh, this is exactly what's happening. I will tell you now, I knew plenty of, before going into college, it's anecdotal. There are a few different anecdotes I have, but that does not equal statistics. But I knew plenty of women who went into college, not conservative, but just generally moderate, and came out a little bit more liberal. Not crazy liberal, not to the point where they're like, oh, all men are evil, going down the full feminist train, but they definitely came out more liberal. I know guys that went into college coming out more liberal. Is that the nature of gaining more information about the world? Is that the nature of the colleges? There are lots of different questions here, but there's no doubt in my mind that college has a little bit of a liberaling bias. I mean, I'll tell you now, I've been all over the ideology-wise, and sometimes I would go into classes being like, oh, hey, no, that's totally wrong, and I would be proven wrong after a long and arduous battle with my professor. And then sometimes I would bring in my perspective and I would be proven right, and it would reaffirm where I stand on certain issues, and sometimes it would sway me down one direction or another. And most of the times that I was swayed, or at least was willing to hear the opinion, was of a liberal worldview, especially in some of my geopolitics classes towards the end of my tenure there. So then again, we did talk realpolitik. We did talk about the hardliners and all of those sort of things, and trying to get rid of those necessarily biases on party, but just looking at the world as it is. But my point being that a lot of the professors at colleges are a little bit more liberal. So with the rising education level, which has been pretty steady for males, if not decreasing, actually, maybe that's one of the factors. But then you would say, Alex, but that can't account for the other part, which is becoming more conservative and anti-feminist. Actually, I think there's a possibility that, at least for becoming more conservative, at least statistically, could be borne out by the fact that less men are going to college, and therefore they are getting less of this more liberal worldview that would be taught within colleges. They are gaining less information to certain statistics that could prove points that I don't want to say they're ignorant to things, because you don't need to go to college to live life, be successful, have a happy life, make a good living, so on and so forth. But there's definitely certain bits of information that you're probably not going to run into. Like if you live in rural Shenandoah County in Virginia, you are probably not going to run into much racial strife. And then if you go to college, you're going to be presented with lots of different evidence and data. Even in small little rural counties, you're going to run into sociology departments that are putting out this sort of data. There's professors who want to push the certain racial agendas, make sure that everybody is aware of what's going on with certain students, make sure that certain students feel affirmed. And then when you go into social science classes, they're going to break down the conversation based on race and how different effects in their community are going to affect outcome. I mean, that's a natural thing that we're going to study within sociology, because sociology is looking at different societal factors and the shaping of people coming through those societal factors. And guess what? In America, there are different outcomes for lots of different people, genders, sexes, same thing, sorry. There's lots of different outcome for sexes. There's lots of different outcomes for different racial groups. There's different outcomes for people of different economic strata. And of course, you're going to be confronted with all of this, given information about all of this. And no offense to sociology professors, a lot of them lean a little bit more liberal. And if you take offense to that, you probably are a liberal sociology professor. And if you are not taking offense to that, you're probably not a liberal sociology professor, or you're someone who's just like, I mean, yeah, it happens to be a little bit true. I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing either. You can have whatever ideology, you can have whatever position you want, but when we're having these discussion about why people are going one way or another, and let's be clear, there are plenty of more trends. I mean, feminism going to this next degree where it's no longer, we're at fourth wave intersectional feminism, where it's no longer about making sure that everybody starts on the same level. It's now about making sure that one group gets ahead rather than the other. Not get ahead like the other, get ahead rather than the other. Then yes, you're going to also see more conservative males and anti-feminists. But I think college has a huge part to play in this one as well. Then again, I went to college, so maybe that's why I'm a little bit biased. Maybe I've seen it firsthand. Maybe I only can speak on the experiences that I have had personally, and I don't have all the information. Maybe there are some raging liberal women in rural Appalachia, in rural Oklahoma, who have not gone to college, and yet they are fully bought into the feminist ideals, the fourth wave intersectional feminism. Sure, maybe that's possible. I don't see it happening very often, but hey, maybe it is possible. And let's be clear, some women can go through college and not come out liberal, just like some guys can go through college and not come out liberal. So, yeah, my point being, it's a very interesting idea that this is, or at least an interesting phenomenon that this is happening, especially with correlations of higher education rates, the new onslaught of feminism. And the author wants to also talk about Donald Trump. They're like, hey, this is all on Donald Trump. He is a misogynist. So in being a misogynist, it's more socially permissible for men to be misogynist, and that's going to lead them to be more conservative or at least anti-feminist, and then extrapolating from there, being conservative. Let me give you a little hint here. Men who are conservative men who are liberal, men who are progressive, men who are nationalists, men who are from Canada, men who are from India, men are from the United States. All of them can be misogynist. One side does not have a monopoly on misogyny. Wow, ooh, I kind of like that alliteration. No monopoly on misogyny. No male monopoly on misogyny. But I guess there might be a male monopoly on misogyny. Maybe there are a few female misogynists, but not many out there. But my point being that it does not fall solely on the conservative movement within the United States to be the misogynist. You could be a misogynist if you're on either side. Now, is the argument that Donald Trump is perceived to be a misogynist, says some uncouth things about women? Sure. Do I think that he's out there saying that women are not, women are inferior to men? Very seldom have I heard something to that, which even alludes to that. Now, maybe he treats women differently than he treats men because he has an attraction towards them. I don't know. There are examples there that you can point out. And once again, that is the uncouth behavior. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he believes that women are inferior. I mean, I hate he had women in his administration. He has women around him. There are lots of competent women in his businesses. But I do think it's a true statement that he's at least thinking about it. He at least knows strong women. I mean, he literally got Laura Trump as co-chair of the RNC. He's praised his daughter for her business acumen in the past. Whether or not he necessarily liked Nikki Haley now, he did like her then when he put her in to be the UN ambassador. You could say, oh, well, all of those are diversity hires. And sure, I think maybe you could try to make that argument. But at the end of the day, I really don't believe that he believes they're unequal. I do believe that he believes they're different. And guess what? If you're a fourth wave intersectional feminist and you're trying to argue that women and men aren't different, I have a world shattering thought for you. They are. They inherently are. And if that is something, if not acknowledging that is going to make you a misogynist, then yes, I think there are a lot more misogynists on the conservative side than on the liberal side. I know plenty of my liberal friends also are sitting there like, yeah, no, I'm a woman. I fully am on board with some of the policy proposals of the Democratic Party more, but I'm still going to have my boyfriend do some things that I don't feel that I am physically capable to do. I am not well prepared to handle, so on and so forth. So it's not exclusively conservatives that believe this, but my point being, these are all underlying factors. Even though the author wants to say, oh, put it all on Trump, and I think my explanations are a little bit more varied, a little bit more wide, can have a, a broader swath that we're painting with. The author wants to throw it on to Trump and the strong man argument. The men resonate with the strong man. There may be something to that. I'm not going to pretend that there's not. But we have to look at the underlying causes of why some men are looking to a strong man. Because I think personally that is a symptom, not a cause. Hey, then again, that's just me. That's just me. So let's jump to our second article that comes from the New York Times. And this is Shortcuts Everywhere, How Boeing Favored Speed Over Quality. And I'm not going to spend the most amount of time on this article. I'm not going to completely deep dive, mainly because you've probably heard a lot of what's going on. It's a lot of recaps of different incidences. It does have some interesting quotes, especially towards the end, where it's describing some of the practices that I think are really important to highlight. And then if you want to go do more research for yourself, please do. Quote, under pressure to show regulators, airlines, and passengers that the company is taking the latest crisis seriously, Boeing announced sweeping changes to its leadership on Monday. Chief Executive David Calhoun will leave at the end of the year, and Stan Deal, the head of the commercial airplane division, which makes the 737 MAX, retired immediately. So they're obviously saying, hey, this is going to do something. As someone pointed out yesterday in a podcast I was listening to, that's still 9 months. Yeah, not like the end of the fiscal year, which would actually be a little bit longer. But no, it's the end of this year. That's 9 months. So it's kind of like, we're going to say he's going to retire, but we're going to give him time to get his stuff in order. And it's kind of a PR move. Not saying that replacing people that were responsible for what was going on is not crucial, but the fact that it's so delayed instead of immediate is definitely a bit of a PR move. They're probably trying to let things die down a little bit before he leaves, so it's not tainting his career that he left because of all these things. There could be lots of different reasons. But I want to get to some of the problems that were present in the Boeing factories. Quote, current and former Boeing employees, most of whom spoke on the condition of anonymity because they are not authorized to speak to reporters and feared retaliation, offered examples of how quality has suffered over the years. Many said they still respected the company and its employees and wanted Boeing to succeed. One quality manager in Washington state who left Boeing last year said workers assembling planes would sometimes try to install parts that had not been logged or inspected. That's a big no-no, because you're working off the assumption, and if you're doing this without inspecting them, and I think anybody with common sense understands this, but I'm going to spell it out, and because I've worked in places where you don't necessarily have to inspect every single piece, you are encouraged to, because let's be clear, a long rebar or a certain mix of concrete actually could be very dangerous if it's not done right. So I take that back. But certain pieces of rebar, if there's a little bit of weakness in one place, it's not like you have to completely replace it. You can strengthen it with another piece of rebar, but you do have to do some of these quality checks to make sure that everything is okay. And when they're saying, okay, hey, no, we need to get it over to the plane as quickly as possible, you are relying fully on your supplier to have not messed up. And if you have faith in them, great, good for you. Quality is always going to fail every once in a while. If it's 1 in 400, all it takes is 1 in 400. And then that plane may not be at the best tip-top shape it can be. Now imagine you're doing this with a whole bunch of different parts in a plane because there are thousands of them. What if it is 2, 3, 4? What if it's just 4 things that weren't inspected properly and they all happen, all the ones that are broken within that batch happen to go into that one plane? That is not safe. So at the end of the day, you need to trust your suppliers, but double check them. Trust but verify, I believe, is a great president of ours used to say. And there's lots of different examples of things like this. Quote, a worker currently at Boeing's 747 Dreamliner factory in North Charleston, South Carolina, described seeing numerous problems on planes being assembled, including wires being routed incorrectly, raising the risk that they could rub against one another, resulting in damage. And these small things, they may seem, wires rubbing together in the wrong direction. Yes, I'm not going to say that it's the end of the world. If the wires are rubbing probably 99 times out of 100, it's not going to be an issue. But when these sort of standards fall, when they are not necessarily held up every single time, bigger things can slip by as well. And also maybe that 1 out of 100 times the wires rubbing the wrong way can actually cause some sort of issue. Maybe they actually start to rub through the wiring, the coating on the outside, and then there's some sort of electrical fire. These are all different possibilities, and I'm not going to say it's the end of the world, because I do understand when you're moving fast, maybe if you have to get something done, and it doesn't seem like a huge deal. Hey, the wiring, we're going to get it in there, no big deal. But some of these things, when you lose attention for the small things, you lose attention for the big things. And it's the nature of Boeing trying to move fast, trying to cut costs, getting rid of lots of older employees. That's one thing that they mentioned a lot in this article, how during COVID, since the pension plan is based on interest rates, a lot of people who were from the older generation who were at Boeing for over 23 years, they left with those higher interest rates to lock in those good bonuses for those pensions. And training isn't exactly where it needs to be, so a lot of people are learning on the job, which, to be clear, I think learning on the job is actually a really important skill. I think a lot of companies need to focus more on it rather than having people just sit in meetings and try to get them to understand things that way. But when you're an engineer, when you're assembling things, especially of this highly dangerous and important to our infrastructure nature, maybe a little bit of extra resources should be brought to you, especially when it's different if it's just oh, we think we should train more. And everybody's like, no, I think we're pretty good. But some Boeing employees specifically asked to be trained more. And Boeing said that they were going to work on it and they were starting new things during this month. But it seems like that was spurred on by the crisis rather than preempting these sort of things so the crisis don't happen in the first place. So maybe that's another consideration that needs to be thought about in the future of Boeing when Mr. Calhoun steps down in 9 months. So we'll see. We'll see. There's going to be more reporting, especially with everything going on. It's just hot news, okay? At the end of the day, if it was one incident with the door plug, it probably would have died off very recently. But then because it was in the zeitgeist, in the mind of the people, and all these other routine stories, all the the flames or different incidences in the air, having to refuel early, like these are normal occurrences. There are millions of flights a day, especially across the United States. But because of the one incident that showed a true critical failure, all the other examples are getting highlighted, and Boeing is getting a lot of heat for it. They probably thought they could skate by without anything happening because small incidences happen all the time, but now even the airlines are coming out against them. But hey, we'll see how it unfolds. Let's jump to our last story that comes from the Daily Beast. DeSantis takes shots at liberal states with squatter crackdown. And to be honest, the squatter crackdown is one reason I want to talk about this. It's a pretty short article, but there was also the banning or restricting of social media use for people that are under the age of 14 without their parents' approval. And these sort of things, I want to talk about that as well. So I'll read the first paragraph, and then we'll extrapolate and go from there and have a broader conversation. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill into law Wednesday aiming to crack down on residential squatters in his state, radically shortening the process by which homeowners request the removal of unauthorized people from the property. The squatter scam ends today with my signature on this piece of legislation, and the state of Florida will be better for it, DeSantis said, according to WTVJ. So this is something, it's a reaction. It's something that was happening. We saw some of these squatter practices, or at least it was made more publicly known after a New York case where a homeowner got it after her parents passed away and there were squatters there. She tried to change the lock. She got arrested. And we see some of these policies in California too. They didn't necessarily address it full sail. And Ron DeSantis, he's won. This is something that his constituency would be happy with. I'm sure homeowners in general would be happy with. He saw that, hey, this is an issue that we have here in Florida, or at least we don't have the most protections in place for our homeowners, and it's getting national news, so I can address this issue, and I can also get a little bit of publicity for it. This is what DeSantis is pretty good at. He sees broader issues, broader conversations, and if there's weakness there in Florida, one, he doesn't let it metastasize into something that he's forced to do by his constituency within Florida. He takes the upper hand and he runs with it, but also he's so effective in getting it done so fast. Yes, he has basically a supermajority in the House and the Senate in Florida, so he can do whatever he wants practically, but he doesn't just sit on his laurels and wait until it becomes a politically viable issue for him. He takes the reins, goes and does it, and then is able to talk about it on the campaign trail next time he's out there, or just to the constituents saying, hey, these are issues that I'm taking on. New York couldn't do anything, California couldn't do anything, trying to make Florida a really great juxtaposition. So I'm assuming when he runs for higher office, or even when he just talks to his constituents, this is what I did for you, and this is what I could do for America, so on and so forth. The other thing is the social media ban. I think that with the broader conversation about the dangers of social media, or at least restrictions for people that are under 14, I should stop using the word ban, because while it's true, it's not true, it's complicated. I don't think that kids should be using social media at that age without the permission of their parents anyway. I think that the parents should have to sign something and do like parental controls on a phone. And what I mean by that is parents opt out of parental controls all the time. You can opt out of all the parental controls you want on the Instagram, but you at least have to know your kids doing that in the first place, so you can have a serious conversation about it with them about some of the risks, or even you can be aware that they're using it. So if something's happening, you can be like, hey, what's causing this? And you can say, oh, maybe it's the TikTok, the Instagram. It allows you to better diagnose situations. So I think it's a bold move, especially with the national conversation the way that it is. And I think is smart on his part. I think there are also plenty of different counter arguments that could be listed, and I would at least be willing to hear those out. But upon prima facie, I'm pretty sure is how you would actually say it. But first viewing, on the viewing of the face of everything, I am right there with the ban, or at least the restrictions. I think that it should have been implemented by the companies. They should have done it themselves rather than having to have an executive of a state do it to them. But I guess they're not willing to restrict one of their largest bases of customers. Maybe that's why their interests are not necessarily aligned on this one. I don't know. Hey, Facebook, don't sue me. I don't know. I'm not here pretending to know all your secrets and the amount of exploitation you want to do of certain segments of the population that can't know better, and you just serve them up ads and they spend mommy and daddy's credit card money. I'm not saying don't sue me. So our last article comes from it's our Daily Delight, and it comes from SWNS again, and this is two swans make love heart shape as they bow their necks in their courtship dance. This is one of the greatest things that we see in nature. Maybe that's where we originally got the idea of the heart being exactly what it is, because it was part of their mating dance. They're obviously expressing love to each other, a little bit of a union. Maybe that's part of why we have that symbol as we do. Or maybe we just picked it out. We noticed it because the heart became an important symbol, and we're like, oh, look at that. They do that symbol of love that we associate. So I don't know which one it is, but I'll tell you now, this video was taken by a worker who's on like a family walkthrough of a park with his kids and everything like that, and he got a cute video of it. It's only like 30 seconds. If you want to brighten up your day, go read this article, or if you want to read any of today's articles, all of them will be linked in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Google Podcasts, as well as Podvine, and the Twitter handle @YourDailyFlip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. This last one on Tuesday, not the one yesterday on Thursday, but the one before on Tuesday, I did a little bit of a segment that's kind of a game that I want to try to implement here on the podcast. So if you've made it this far, you obviously care. Go listen to that over there, so then I can get a little bit of feedback as to whether or not we should implement it, where we should implement it into this part of the podcast, because I think it would be fun, but also it's going to take a little bit of extra time. So are the podcasts going to become longer, or are we going to cut down the time on the first segment? Are we going to replace the daily debate every once in a while? Lots of different options. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.